Hello everyone and welcome to Cannabis in Context. I'm Sherry Boodram, the CEO and co-founder of CannDelta, and today we have with us Anna Lee, the Cannabinista.
Yes.
Welcome.
Thank you.
It's really great to have you here. So we're going to cover a range of topics today, learn all about Anna and what she does and her place in the cannabis space and how she's really impacting what we do here in the industry and really moving our industry forward and supporting those in the industry as well and carrying them along with her. So before we get started, Anna, and before I jump into having you introduce yourself, just a very quick disclaimer here. Everything that we talk about in today's podcast session is really for educational, entertainment purposes only. Great. So welcome. How about you tell us a little bit about yourself? How did you get into the industry? We've all come from so many different diverse backgrounds. That's a really great thing about the industry is that there's a place for everyone. What is your start to the industry and how did you get your name?
Cannabinista literally started during pandemic. I had extra time on my hands. I was working from home. TikTok and Reels were becoming really popular at that time, and I really just started making videos of me making edibles at home. And that's kind of really how it started. It's like as simple as that. Wasn't really until as some videos started getting popularity and I saw that there was a cannabis community online that was hungry for information. They wanted to learn about recipes. They wanted to learn how to infuse edibles. They wanted to learn how to dose. And then from there, that's kind of really where I came up with Cannabinista as a brand. I literally just mashed up two words together, which cannabis and Binista is actually just derived. People think it's barista, but it's actually not. It's fashionista. Okay. So I took that as the ista, meaning like a curator or an enthusiast of something, and kind of just put those words together.
Amazing, I love it. Yeah, I love it. So what were you doing before what you're doing now? So you mentioned that this was something you started during the pandemic. What was your 9 to 5 before this?
Well, I was doing Cannabinista with a full-time job for 3 years. My background is like in business consulting, marketing, finance, like very traditional kind of, Asian background, I guess you could say. And then as of the beginning of this year, so only for a few months now, I decided to go full-time with Cannabinista. It just wasn't sustainable for me to do two completely different things in my life. And ultimately I wanted to invest in myself because, I really believe in Cannabinista as a brand and really contributing to the world in a more positive light for cannabis. And I took the leap of faith, so we'll see how it goes. Okay.
Was there a certain point that you could, identify where you said, okay, this is, I'm ready. Like this is the point, the turning point where I'm going to leave my corporate job and jump into this full time. What was that, that moment in time?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about it for a year and a half, actually, really long time before I made the jump. I'm very risk adverse, so I'm the type of person that wants to make sure I have every backup plan, A, B, C, D, E, F, the whole appendix lined up before I make a jump. So it took me a long time. I didn't have like a pivotal moment, but it was many months of ruminating and many months of being burnt out. And kind of telling myself, okay, by the end of 2023, which is last year, I'll make the jump. But it definitely wasn't like a moment in time. It was like I had the idea and it was just like months and months of feeling the same pressures, and that ultimately burst into me leaving.
Okay, so no turning back and no regrets, right?
For now, yeah. I mean, there was too much content of me online, like consuming cannabis and doing all that. So I'm like, I don't know if other companies would ever take me back, but.
Never know. We're hopefully progressing. So.
Yeah.
Okay, that's amazing. So you mentioned a couple of things in the very beginning about how, very organically people were really resonating with certain aspects of your content. So recipes, they were really interested in. What were some of the other areas?
Yeah, I think it was like general cannabis knowledge. Like, believe it or not, people don't, understand terpenes. People, we're in the industry, so we know a lot of these nuanced things, or people don't understand the difference between CBD and THC, actually. A lot of people still think CBD is non-psychoactive, right? Which is a myth that we're trying to debunk now. People don't understand that, high THC isn't the only important thing. So there's just a lot of subcategories and topics within cannabis, whether it's like cannabis and sleep, cannabis and productivity, cannabis and food, cannabis and health, that I think a lot of people didn't know about because that information is not really publicly available. I mean, there's obviously like traditional media companies that, dabble in providing that education, but I think at least what I saw that people were interested in was like short form content, right? They wanted this information to be presented in a non-text format. They wanted to watch it. They wanted, short and snappy where they could get this information quickly. And that's kind of where I found myself, as like that little sweet spot.
Yeah, there's definitely an advantage, I think, in a hunger in people to understand cannabis in a more candid way, right? Like we all know that there's a lack of education in the industry in general, and a lot of that education is so formal that I don't think that people can really resonate with it and really know how to apply it on their day-to-day life. So, and the platforms that you're on, so you're on Instagram, TikTok, and I guess you have
YouTube, Pinterest,
YouTube well.
Everything,
Yeah, so you're really in an area where you could cater to a wide range of audiences.
Yeah.
And I think with Instagram, you're around 130,000 followers now.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's pretty substantial.
Yeah.
Right? And the time that you've started your accounts. So
Yeah.
that's great.
It's been tough, for sure. I've had accounts taken down in the past as well. So it's just, it's also tough, right? Talking about cannabis online. So that's an added layer of complexity.
Yeah. And that's something we're going to get into as well, right? Like all the challenges that you're going to have to, face, and how you're going to how you navigate things like advertising, just, branding yourselves on these platforms with the restrictions that they have. But before we get into that, how did the interest that you garnered from your audience direct your philosophy for your business? Or was it the other way around, where you had a certain philosophy and that's really where you targeted the audience, or was it more organic than that?
Yeah, I think the philosophy really came from my passion for cannabis. And I'll be honest, like my passion for cannabis grew as I was growing Cannabinista, because as I was learning more about cannabis, I became more obsessed with it. Like I've always loved cannabis when I was, first introduced to it. I saw how it impacted my life in a positive way. But as I started to learn more about the intricacies of the plant and just like how it's, can help in so many different facets, that's when I started developing more of that passion for cannabis. And from there, my philosophy has always been to modernize cannabis education for the modern stoner, really, because I don't necessarily look like someone that's a stoner, but if I'm sitting here right now, and if I told you that, hey, yeah, I actually love dabbing, I actually love concentrates, I love eating edibles, I think people would be surprised by that. And that's really what Cannabinista is about. The philosophy is like defying the traditional definition of what it means to be a stoner and elevating the definition of a stoner, because stoners literally look like anybody on the street now. You can be a teacher, you can be a scientist, you can be a professor, you can be a chef, whatever, right? And you can still be a cannabis consumer. And I think that's really the foundation of Cannabinista and what I'm trying to do.
Yeah, I think that's really important, because that does help to dispel a lot of the stigma that is being faced among non-consumers, but also people who actually are consumers but are afraid to really identify with it or to be more like open about it, especially in minority BIPOC communities. Myself being in that category, I understand that how difficult it is to be able to really see, move the community into a light that really shows that we are doing something that is not really that terrible. Right?
Yeah.
Right, and there's a lot of legitimacy to it, especially with legalization. So let's talk about that a little bit more. So how does that really play into the mission of Cannabinista, right? Like, how are you elevating the BIPOC communities, and what are some of the challenges that you've maybe faced being who you are and doing what you're doing? Yeah,
I think when we look at BIPOC and then also being a woman, these are categories, I guess you can call it, that is not heavily represented in cannabis industry per se. And I think one of the challenges is that it's hard for, let's say, women or people of color to come out and show that they are cannabis consumers because of societal and cultural stigma. So what I mean by that is, obviously within a lot of Asian countries and cultures, cannabis is heavily stigmatized, right? It's like, no, don't do drugs, that's so bad, no debate, it's very black and white. Even though cannabis has come from ancient China, ancient India, and Middle East back in the day, thousands of years ago. So that in itself, I think by showing myself online and actually like putting a face to Cannabinista and the cannabis in general, kind of shows like, people who may look like me may also feel like, like she's also coming out and talking about her cannabis usage, and she doesn't seem like she's someone who doesn't have a good life. Like she doesn't seem like she's sitting on the couch all day doing nothing. Like, hey, like someone relates to that, and I think that is almost kind of giving people a voice or helping them feel more empowered about their cannabis usage or relationship with cannabis. So I think that in itself is just like showing myself online is already like kind of a step of demystifying or kind of breaking down some of the barriers that BIPOC or women feel.
how did your family react when, now that you're so open about it?
Well, it's funny because my family doesn't know about it.
Okay.
So that is still a personal journey that I'm still working on. And I think a lot of people can relate to that as well, because a lot of people, their friends know, right? The people they work with maybe know, right? Especially if you work in a cannabis company. But oftentimes it's the ones that are closest to you that are unaccepting of this. And I think this is a journey that I'm going on right now, and that I think a lot of people actually have related to me as well. I have lots of people messaging me also saying, yeah, my family doesn't approve, and like, you know, how do you deal with it? And it's a tough topic. I think at the end of the day, every family dynamic is so different. Eventually I'll tell them, right? But I think for now, I'm just focusing on me and doing, you know, having the people support me that I know support me in my cannabis usage or cannabis relationship and my business, and just focusing on that.
Yeah. I mean, the journey that you're going through, I'm sure is very meaningful for a lot of others, you know, who follow you, just to know how they can also navigate, right, and have those conversations.
Yeah, so I definitely envision like a later down the road, like a YouTube video where I'm like telling my parents that I'm Cannabinista and then kind of documenting that, and that could be like a whole content piece. But yeah, that will for sure happen one day.
Right, amazing.
Yeah.
You do talk about, you know, the relationship that you have from, you know, a mental and physical perspective, and how it's helped you in those areas. Can you speak to that a little bit more? What do you find, how has it helped you in those areas, right? And you know, maybe touch on what are some of the types of cannabis that has helped you, you know, in those areas. And I know that, you know, in the cannabis industry, you don't really talk about the health benefits. It's never on a product, so you can't buy a product and say, okay, I know that this, I could use it for anxiety, or I could use this for pain. Like, it's not there, right? So oftentimes it's hard when you go to a retail store to even know if you're, you know, if you want that, to even really know what to buy. So I'm just curious to know, you know, how it has helped you, and, you know, how do you help direct people to know kind of, and I know it's a little bit different for every person that's using it. How do you kind of help guide them along that journey?
I think like the first thing I think of is being mindful about cannabis consumption, right? Mindful consumption is something that I frequently talk about on my platform, and that's knowing your intention and your dose. And I think it's important to caveat that cannabis is not for everyone. Just like how you know, some people have food allergies, some people have food sensitivities. Like, that's kind of the same approach, I think, is that the cannabis plant is so diverse, and it's so nuanced with different endocannabinoid systems, and that is not even being fully studied, right? Like, everyone has such a unique ECS and how we interact with the plant. And I think the first thing that I kind of tell people is like, cannabis actually might not be for you. There actually might be other things that are, you know, could be a substitute that maybe for a person to explore first. But when I think about like how I use cannabis and what it's helped me on my personal journey, is really being mindful about what I'm using, when, and why. Like, most people think that I'm consuming cannabis 24/7. That's actually like not the case. Like, I probably consume less than like the average cannabis person, I guess you could say. I'm probably like 3 to 4 times a week. Depends on my cycle, depends on the time of the year, the season, depends on my mood, depends on what's happening in my life that day. I don't consume during the day, really. I'm usually a nighttime person. So I really try to be intentional and mindful about when I choose to consume. And also just that I find helps creating like a healthy relationship with cannabis, right? But you know, over the years, I've learned more about how to use cannabis that works best for me. When I first started getting introduced to cannabis, it was transactional. It was like 1 + 1 = 2. I'm using this to get lifted, and then I'm gonna fall asleep. Great. And it was just like THC, right? Like, I didn't really know anything. This was like, you know, let's say like, you know, 10 years ago, right? And as I started learning more about the plant and almost like A/B testing on myself, because there's so many variations. There's like hundreds of cannabinoids, hundreds of doses and formulations, hundreds of products. How do you know? It's so overwhelming, right? So I can't even imagine like when a regular consumer steps into the store. It's like literally decision fatigue, right? You just like, and plus no one can talk to you about what to buy, so you literally are
not
standing
the best
there. Worst experience. But for me personally, it's just really, I've done a lot of research online, a lot of research on myself, and I've been able to find formulations. I won't say products, because it's really formulations at the end of the day, and and formats. So whether it's oil or concentrates or flour or ingestibles, I've been able to dial in like a really specific formula for myself. So I know, okay, if I need help with feeling more present, this is what I'll use. If I need something for my muscles because I just did a crazy lifting session, this is what I'm going to use. Or I'm going to have a night in with my partner, a date night, this is what I'm going to use. So I think that's really kind of how I've built a relationship with cannabis, and also knowing what works for me.
Yeah, I think that this is a super important conversation because, if we want to destigmatize the industry and, move forward, we do need, there are people who are new entrants, right? Like to the industry, they're new consumers, and it is a bit of a learning curve, like, to be honest. And, I think what you've described is fairly accurate to people's experience where, you're kind of experimenting on yourself, right? Trying to find like what works and what doesn't work. And oftentimes, people get to a point where they're not really finding what's working. They don't know who to talk to about it. So then that kind of like stops the journey prematurely. For you, what resources did you use to help you during that process? And how long did it take until you got to a point where you felt confident in like, this is what I take for this and this is what I take for that? What was that like?
Yeah, it was honestly just like watching videos, like traditional media, I would say, like, the High Times of the world, or like reading PubMed articles and trying to digest all that scientific information into like, to make sense of it. But I would say a lot of my learning, honestly, majority was like testing on myself, right? Obviously doing it in a safe way, start low, go slow, always, making sure that you're dosing mindfully. But I feel like because it's so individualistic, there's actually no formula for like what product to buy to help you with what, because there's too many factors and variables that can impact like a product. Like if let's say if I was to consume one thing one day and I did the exact same thing tomorrow, it actually could feel completely different because of maybe something happened between those 2 days. Maybe something, maybe like I got extra tired or I didn't get good sleep. Like that could have impacted, or maybe I didn't eat enough, or like there's just a lot of variables that I feel like you really have to know your body so well and dialed in. And I think oftentimes people actually don't even know their body well. They don't know their mental well. They don't know how their physical body's feeling well. So it's quite a difficult process, I would say, to know. But it was just like online research. And then that's kind of ties into why I felt like there wasn't really good information. Like everything was really boring to read. Like I was like, oh, this is really, I don't want to read this like 1,500 word blog post, right? Or like, I don't want to dissect this PubMed article, but which is funny because now I'm doing that and just doing it elsewhere. But
doing it for the people.
Doing it for the people. But that was kind of the process.
Yeah. So if you're super curious, that's another, another reason to follow Cannabinista on all the platforms. You get these really quick snippets of information, which I think is super helpful for everyone. You also have on your website a dosage calculator. For, I guess, the
Making
recipes,
edibles,
and you have recipes on there. So that's also very helpful for everyone who's really looking to, do it themselves and to, have some support while they're doing it.
Exactly, because, doing the math on it is just too complicated. Like, calculator, tool it out, that's all I want,
Amazing, I love it. Okay, let's switch gears a little bit and talk about, your brand, how you got it out there. And let's start with, tell me about some of the marketing challenges you've had. We're obviously in a very heavily regulated industry. You are an ancillary business, right? So you're not a licensed producer. You don't sell products. You don't make cannabis for sale or anything like that. But you're still impacted by the regulations, right? Can you explain, how you educated yourself on the regulations, what that process was like, and how you apply it to the marketing strategies for your business?
It was, again, trial and error. It's funny. It's almost like everything that I've learned is through trial and error because there's no playbook. Like
you love emerging industries, right? And being an entrepreneur on top of that.
So. I mean, because we're literally writing the playbook in a sense, right? But the playbook continues to change. When I first started out on Instagram, when I was doing Cannabinista Passion, it was just literally posting recipes, whatever, for fun. I was using the word cannabis. I was talking about cannabis freely. I was showing everything. I guess you could say, innocent. I didn't know about regulations. I didn't even know anything about community guidelines. I didn't know about regulations because it was like a hobby account in the beginning, right? And then I was like, oh, why am I getting things taken down? What does this mean? And then I started understanding. And then that whole process has also developed, right? So it was honestly making mistakes and then learning from that, and then finding what works and doesn't work in how you can talk to cannabis, and then obviously reviewing the Cannabis Act, right? Like that's very important, as well as, making sure even though it's a very complicated piece of document that can be interpreted in many ways.
Right.
Knowing that was very important, and also researching what other people are doing and networking and talking to other people. Knowing how LPs are doing, knowing how marketing agencies are doing it, knowing how, you know, consulting companies are doing it, whatever, and learning from them as well, and basically building like a pool of information. So I know how to act within the space, I guess you could say. Yeah, I mean, it's tough. You just cannot talk about cannabis. Like, pretty much that's basically what it's dialed down to, is like, even if you are not, you know, age gating, even if you're not making health recommendations, even if you're not doing anything against legislation, there is another layer, which is social media legislation.
Right. Yeah.
So then once you almost have like two large, you have the government, and then you have the social media giants, which are almost basically like government nowadays. It makes it such a thin layer of what you can actually say, do, and present on anywhere.
So then how do you navigate that?
Yeah, it's evolving, right? Like, what I did 3 years ago is different from now, and it keeps changing because, you know, back then there was a process. I actually wrote an article about this on 2021 about this is how you get your disabled Instagram account back. I gave all the forms, I gave the process, and a lot of retailers and LPs actually use that to get their accounts back, which is amazing, and individual content creators and so forth. That is so dated now. None of that works because the whole platform has changed. I know I'm just speaking to Instagram, but there's obviously like TikTok side of things as well. So that whole SOP is gone now. So that article is completely irrelevant because so much has changed. So you almost have to roll with the punches and see what's happening, because now they have like the account status side of things, right? Where at least it's a little bit more transparent, you know which pieces of content are not okay. But even then now it seems like they have AI also looking at content, right? Or they also have people reporting. Right. So there's just a lot of external forces. So how do I kind of navigate this? Because what we've talked about just sounds like I can't even operate. I can't even exist, right? Which is kind of true in a way, you really can't. Exactly. And how I've done that is really using these heavily regulated platforms as top of funnel. It's an in and out strategy, right? It's a quick, get your message out, knowing that you're gonna get taken down or whatever, but making sure you're funneling all these people back to your own channels, website, Discord, newsletter. And that's how you continue to grow, is like, that's really kind of just been my strategy, is like in and out, right? But also censoring, talking about it in a way where maybe you're using like innuendos, maybe you're not talking about it, you're not showing it, you're talking about your personal experience or whatever it is. Yeah. There's a couple TikTokers right now where it's called gardening TikTok. That's the new term for cannabis. And that has emerged now. So they've found a way to talk about cannabis, it's like through gardening. So I'm gonna garden, and then they just talk about growing flowers and rolling flowers, and like you kind of talk like that. I think that's a great strategy to stay on these platforms and talk about it. But my issue with talking like that, and I used to talk like that, is that once you cannot talk about scientific terms and talk authentically, it becomes so convoluted that people won't even know what you're talking about, and you're not providing education anymore. Yeah. So
yeah, and it also continues the stigma, right? Because
exactly.
You're basically stigmatizing it.
Yes, 100%.
Right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's very tricky in that sense.
Very tricky.
Would you say that there is one particular platform that is more cannabis friendly compared to the rest?
If we're talking about social platforms, this one you probably wouldn't expect it is Pinterest.
Okay.
Yeah, Pinterest doesn't seem to have a regulation on taking down, or has a process on taking down content related to cannabis. Right. It's very interesting. I don't know why. Maybe they haven't, maybe because people don't think to go to Pinterest. But it's a very popular community for canna moms.
Okay. So in terms of number of followers, where does that fall compared to?
Oh, it's the lowest for me. It's actually been the least prioritized because Pinterest is mostly, like, I would say, a photo platform. Yeah. They're trying to incorporate video, but I find that photo is still dominating. So I haven't really historically focused too much on Pinterest, but I can see for certain businesses that enjoy it, you know, that can be an avenue. But other than that, I think, like, at the end of the day, Instagram and TikTok are still the biggest. I mean, YouTube is great too. YouTube actually lets your content exist. So they'll just flag it as 18 plus. So at least you don't have to remove it or archive it. So I would say that YouTube Shorts is great too. They don't seem to have a process yet for flagging. So I would say it's like the early mover advantage is like get on what's on the top and
get your brand going. You have a incredible brand presence, I would say. You've obviously worked hard at that. And how do you help to establish and maintain your brand loyalty with your customers?
I like to call them community because that's like really what I call.
Yeah, right.
I think a lot of businesses should think of their customers as community as well. I think loyalty comes with building trust and authenticity, right? With community engagement, that's like literally the core of Cannabinista. Like since day one, like community is literally like a pillar within like my brand, my business. And I take it to lengths of like, I literally will respond to every DM that I get, and even voice note people.
Okay.
Because also it's better so things don't, because I think that they're reading our messages as well, I'm pretty sure. So that's why I voice note, so it's easier to not get flagged. But things like that give back to your community, and that helps build loyalty, right? When you've kind of established like almost like a mini personal relationship with your community, with your customer, whatever you want to call it, that goes a long way. Like that human touch really goes a long way in strengthening that loyalty between you and that person.
Yeah, I mean the brand is you in a sense. Like you have the education, but it's really you that people are resonating with. And I think this is drawing that community that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, that totally makes sense. What would you say is some of the elements that you have employed to help build your brand?
I think number one is providing value. Like, why would someone follow me if I'm not helping them in any way? Like everything I do has to provide value or help them learn something, even if it's just like something really small. Like I posted a video the other day about charcoal filters. And adding additional layer of filtration system. If you choose to smoke joints and you want to further protect your lungs, there's these charcoal filters, right? I don't have to associate any brand, it's just giving free information out that, hey, you can add this if you want extra filtration. So things like that, or even just showing up on the stories and then showing it what it looks like, right? You're providing value or helping people learn a new perspective that they haven't thought of. So that's like number one. And then two is like, when you're providing that value, how are you communicating with them, right? It's like, is it authentically, or are you just doing like a slideshow or like something, it has to be like authentic, organic, very natural, and like, right? And that comes with like me as a personality, me connecting with people. But those two things, like value and authenticity, is really the core of it.
Yeah, like I think from, when I go through, when I'm on your Instagram, I could really feel the passion that you have in it. Like you're doing it because you actually love it. You're not doing it because you're, just trying to get followers or, trying to be popular or anything. Like it's like you actually love what you're doing and you want to share your love and your know-how with other people so that they can, feel the same way. So I think that that's very evident in what you produce.
Yeah, I even get excited about that, like in person as well. Like whenever my friends come over, they're like, "Oh, what new toys do you got?" And I'm like, and I showed them. I'm like, "Oh, hey, look, I'm using vaporizing technology now because there's no combustion." And then I show them all my tools, or I tell them, "Oh, hey, like try this or whatever." Like, and they learn a lot too. And I think like in private settings, I'm also trying to help people around me have better relationships with the plant.
Right. What digital marketing strategies have proven to be successful in the cannabis market for you?
Yeah, I've never paid for any sponsored ads or anything like that, so I don't necessarily have like traditional paid media, and obviously you can't do that, right? Like you literally cannot buy ads unless you know someone at Facebook or something like that, which is another added layer of complexity. But what's worked for me is really building in-house content, right? Because ultimately that's what it is, and I think a lot of businesses should do that as well. Because at the end of the day, when you build things in-house, you can't get censored. You can say whatever you want, and you own that customer base, right? So even like what you guys are doing now with this podcast, like, or this video, right? You guys are building in-house content, and that is like king, like that is queen, like that is like the most important way to reach customers, and then finding ways to get them to subscribe to your newsletter. Like email marketing is actually, you think it's dated, it's actually not. It's one of like still the top digital marketing strategies, and relatively inexpensive, right? Except for paying for MailChimp or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, really those are kind of like some of the strategies that worked well. Funneling back to private channels, like, Discord communities. People do great with like WhatsApp groups, right? Ways that you can connect with your customer base that is offline is important, especially in an industry like this.
Yeah, and you're mentioning how the social platforms are sort of top of funnel, and then it diverts back to your website.
Yeah, website,
and then that
yeah.
has like the newsletter. You could
Yeah.
subscribe to your newsletter in there, and then like you could further engage with the
Exactly.
community that way.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that. What would you say are some of the emerging trends in the space, and that you feel is shaping cannabis marketing?
Obviously like AI, like ChatGPT, people are talking all about that kind of stuff. Like, I think it's a good like way to, frame your marketing plan, but it's not gonna fill in the gaps, right? So I think it's a good tool, let's say, as like, your first, you wanna build a marketing plan, you wanna build a content strategy, whatever it is, use ChatGPT to help you build out the framework. In terms of other trends, we talked about email newsletter. That's definitely going to be very important. And I think it's just finding ways to kind of circumvent these traditional platforms that are, putting a lot of pressures on businesses to exist, and building in-house content. At the end of the day, almost every business has to kind of be a little media agency in-house, and investing in, I think a lot of the traditional marketing, such as like blog copy and like SEO, is actually undervalued 100%, especially in a lot of the new emerging cannabis brands. A lot of cannabis brands I've seen don't have good websites, don't have any blog content, and I'm like, how are you getting ranked when you get searched? Like, Google search doesn't really censor too much, like they censor on businesses, right? Like GMB, but in terms of like content and copy, like that is where businesses should look at as well.
So you mentioned SEO. I know that you do have blogs. You have a blog section on your website, so that helps, of course. And then you manage the SEO, I'm assuming, on your...
Yeah, SEO is expensive, so I can't hire someone for that.
Yeah, it's a lot of work, guys.
Yeah, it's a lot of work too. Yeah, I mean, it's very simple, right? It's just like doing certain things, using certain keywords, but ultimately, like as a business, you just got to write content that relates to your business, but also provides value.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that's great. You also had an event recently. So you had 420, was not too long ago. You hosted an entire event. You coordinated it. Tell me a little bit about that experience and how that helped not only your brand, but also the community.
Yeah, events is something that a lot of people say, oh, I don't really know what the ROI is, blah, blah, blah. And, sure, to a certain extent, but the reason why I did this event is because for community. It's bridging the parasocial world, so bringing that online community in person. Because people have known me for 3 years through the internet, right? And I've done a small event before last year. It was more intimate, but I knew that this was something that I wanted to do because people are hungry for in-person connection, right? And there's no cannabis places right now that you can go enjoy cannabis, but there's coffee shops, where people can go enjoy coffee, which is also a psychoactive drug, by the way, or people can go to bars, which is technically also a drug as well. But why isn't there a place where people can, go to a cannabis coffee shop and hang out and work? I don't know, it's very normal, I would think. But obviously there isn't a safe space for people to consume cannabis in public settings where they can meet other people that are like-minded. And that's what really Cannabinista, the events was about, was like bridging people that also didn't relate to the traditional stoner stereotype to come together and celebrate the community, the culture, and just, I guess, Cannabinista in general, like everything that we've kind of built together as a community. So that was really the reason for doing that event. And 420 is a perfect time to do that because we celebrate like National Taco Day and National like Pizza Day. Why can't we celebrate cannabis, right? So yeah, it was great for the community, and even like when I look back now, I actually got a lot of leads from that as well. Like all the content that I put out from that event kind of showed brands, not even just in Canada, in US and stuff like that, like, oh, like this is cool, right? Like, so it was actually kind of also like a top of funnel marketing, so I got like some leads from that as well. But at the end of the day, it was really built for community, and it was a full-time job in itself. Like, event planning is not a joke. I really, really underestimated event planning. Like, I didn't know that it was going to take up.
How many months ahead of time did you?
It was like 4 or 5 hours. Sorry, 4 or 5 months. Sorry, not hours. 4 or 5 months of planning. Over 1,000 hours. I calculated this because in my Google Calendar, there's a way to like color code, and then you can see the total. So everything related to the event, I would color code it a certain color. And when I calculated it at the end, it was 1,000 hours just on me, not even including external vendors, right?
Right.
So it was a love project, a love baby. Very tough to do, but I'm glad I did it. people want events. People want to connect with other people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we did an event recently, and that was, a lot of what I heard as well. It's so nice to come out and meet other people in the community and have discussions, and not always doing things remotely or online or just nothing.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, that's really great that you did that.
Yeah.
As a woman in business, an entrepreneur, more broadly speaking, what are some tips that you would give someone else who is looking to enter the cannabis industry, whether or not it's starting their own business or just joining another business, joining another company?
Yeah, I get that question a lot, and the first thing I would say is try different areas of the industry before you kind of silo yourself into one thing. And what I mean by that was when I was doing Cannabinista, I actually did brand ambassadorship work for an LP, at a retail shop. I tested out a few times just to see what the floor experience was like, the retail experience. And then I did some, I've kind of dabbled in different areas. Even in the beginning, I started off doing recipes, but now I'm really focusing more on education, as a broad topic. Because what you think you want to get into might, or probably will, shift as you learn more and as you kind of fine tune your craft. And I've kind of experienced that myself. It's I thought I was just going to be, a short form content person focusing only on recipes.
Yeah.
And as I started doing it, I'm no, my passion is actually providing education, but actually in longer form content, and more conversational and things like that. So that's also kind of my personal pivot. Things can always change down the road. So another tip I would give is get out there and network and meet people.
Yes.
I know it can be daunting, I know it can be annoying, and eventually it will get boring because it will be the same stuff, but in the beginning it's good, right? Go to all the trade shows, go to all the networking events, go to meet people for coffee, message them through LinkedIn or whatever, or Instagram, and get to learn about different areas of the industry. And that's probably one of the favorite things I do is actually the one-on-one coffee things that I do with cannabis consultants, retail owners, microprocessors, growers. I love having that opportunity because you just learn so much more and you get a more 360 view of the industry, and things will always come up. Being connected, someone will always plug you in. I just connected with an AAPI group, Asians in Cannabis Roundtable. The guy is actually opening a retail store in New Jersey. And he was able to connect me to 2 other lovely women in cannabis to meet in LA next week. So things like that, it's I would have not been able to have that connection, right? So you never know.
And one opportunity leads to the next, and you just never know. I mean, one of the things that I try to think about whenever I go to an event is at least take away one piece of information, right? Or learn one new thing, and just that's just leave it at that, and then don't put too much pressure on yourself, and just say, okay, at least have one takeaway. Yeah. And then anything else on top of that is gravy, right?
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That helps to take off the pressure and the anxiety if you are feeling, if you're new to the space and if you're, going to a networking event and you feel that you're feeling that pressure. Yeah. That's a good way to think about it. So yeah, super important. Do you feel that that the space is crowded now, that there's not enough room for new entrants? And, depending on what your answer is, how should people help to differentiate themselves in the cannabis space?
I think there's always going to be room for everybody, right? I was listening to Tim Ferriss' podcast the other day, and he was saying how, because he was one of the OGs in the podcasting space, and back then in 2014, someone told him that he was too late to the game. And he's really? Literally he has over 1 billion listens now. So people will always tell you, oh, you're too late. That's not true. That's never going to be true, right? You see with the whole reinvention of now short form video, and then now all these other things, and there's always space for everyone to participate. It's just how you carve out your differentiation. So to answer your second question is how do you differentiate is you really have to offer something unique, I think, that no one else has, whether it's your formulation of your product, whether it's your branding, whether it's your story, or whether it's how you show up for your community. There has to be something, and it's a bit of finding that niche and white space as well. But I would say also don't get too boggled down by that, because you can always take things from inspiration and just tweak it in your own way, and that can also be a fresh outlook, right? So I think it's just you really do have to find some kind of nugget of being different, but it's just how you represent that information.
Yeah, you talked about building that that brand loyalty and that community base. What advice would you give people to help to also do that for themselves? What can they do, right? Especially if they're they're new to the industry, they're just starting out. How do they really get the momentum, I guess, to get a community base behind them?
Yeah, I mean, like, I think the truth is like social media is going to be a good lever for that because it's free, it's easy to reach mass, right? And especially when you're starting out, it's kind of a volume game. It's like how many people can you get interested in looking at your business, and then obviously you'll have people drop off, and then people who are interested in you will stay, and then you got to nurture those people. So I would say honestly, yeah, get on social media. That is definitely important. Even if you're a retailer, even if you're a microprocessor, like anyone, or even if you're like anything to do in cannabis, you can be on social media and show up online and show the process of what you're doing. I think people love those like behind the scenes, or like, oh, how I'm I don't know, like let's say I'm like a grower, and it's like, this is a day in my life as a grower. Like, I don't know, I just think of it like that. But there's so many different ways to show up online, and then that really kind of builds that community, because especially in the time investment, like for you to put together a video and reach a couple thousand people versus you having to go to every individual person, like the online game is definitely going to help you in terms of being more efficient.
What's your process for creating engaging content that's still compliant?
Yeah, I mean, it's very tough. That's content, I think at the end of the day is like, I have the freedom of speech as a Canadian to speak however I want to and express myself, and really that's what I do with my platforms. It's really expression, right? I'm expressing myself through a creative art form, which is written media, which is photography, videography. So how I think about like my process is like, what do people want to, what do people have questions about? That's really what I think about, right? It's like, what do I wish I knew about cannabis when I was first dabbling in cannabis? And I really look at those questions. It's almost looking at SEO topics as well, like what's highly searched, right? What are people searching for in the search bar in Google, and building content around that, right? And answering those questions. And then obviously, it sounds really simple, but it's not, because you actually have to like script everything out and do all that. But the process is quite simple. It's just like put content out that people actually want to see, and that not something that is selfish. It has to be selfless.
Okay, yeah, that's very true. And again, like we were talking about how the authenticity really resonates with people, and people know the difference, right?
Yeah.
Like they're looking for that connection.
Yeah.
So as long as find a way that you can do that and bring that to your audience.
And putting out your personality as well, right? Because people can feel the energy through, even though it's just like a video screen, but like one of the things like that I feel really good about is like when I meet people in real life, they're like, oh, you're like the same person online. And I'm like, okay, thank you. So it's like, it's a good thing. It means that like my message is being communicated properly, right? So I think that's important as well, as like, showing up authentically.
What are some of the initiatives that you're, looking to, move forward with in the next, for the rest of the year or even next year? What are some of the highlights for you?
Yeah, I kind of like talked about this a little bit earlier, but I'm actually kind of focusing more on long form content. So, I'm really known for the short, snappy TikTok reels, doing that, but it's burnt me out. Like, I'll be honest, it's really burnt me out through the past few years of doing that. And I felt unhappy with it actually, because I felt like I was chasing certain trends to hit the virality, to do things in a certain way that was actually taking away from the way that I wanted to talk about cannabis. And I guess also as I'm getting older, I don't really want to watch 30-second videos. I actually want to sit down and watch, like, I just have like less patience, or I have more patience, but I want to see content that's slower. And not feel like inundated with
like switch on, switch off, like
exactly
scrolling.
Funny enough, I actually don't scroll. I only scroll for research. So I try to like not scroll, and obviously like reviewing my own content. But yeah, Cannabinista, I'm definitely taking things on the long form side of things. So YouTube is going to be a big focus for me. Spotify, I'm launching a podcast this summer. I'll also be relaunching my website this summer as well, to make it easier for people to find cannabis information that they're looking for, whether it's recipes, tips and tricks, cannabis education, and then,
Okay. So a couple things to look out for. You said your website,
my newsletter as well.
Your newsletter, podcast. Have you publicized the name of your podcast? Is that
it's just going to be Cannabinista?
Cannabinista,
but yeah, it'll essentially be educational content, but also conversation with successful people in cannabis, and really demystifying that stereotype. And then with my newsletter, that's something I send out every Friday. It's a very fun newsletter. It's got a bit of fun, but also education, where I share, new blog posts, new recipes, new videos, but also I kind of give a spin on what's happening in the world of cannabis and give my 2 cents on it, and kind of whether it's sharing like new research that's happening, or legislation within, Thailand, the whole recriminalization now, or like getting people like kind of the in of like, what's happening in cannabis world. That's what my newsletter is all about, and it's a really fun little snippet on a Friday morning. Yeah.
Amazing. So where can people, listen or follow you or find this information that you're talking about to stay updated? Where can they go?
Yeah, just type Cannabinista anywhere, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, Spotify, and my website.
Yeah. And sign up for a newsletter.
Yeah.
Okay, amazing. So, I guess a few last questions. The industry's continue to evolve, as we all know. Where do you see the industry going in the next, let's say, 5 years?
That's an interesting question. I think hopefully we'll see more legalization across federal U.S. states. That's probably going to happen. You're seeing a lot of that movement. I mean, this past year there was quite a bit, so good movement there. On the Canada side of things, definitely want to see some changes in, regulations, like even with things like lounges, the 10 milligram limit. There's a lot of these things that got punted, and I mean, with the recent revision, they really didn't change anything. So I think there needs to be a little bit of reform, and also consumers speaking up about what they want, because I think right now that's actually a gap. It's a lot of industry that's trying to make change, but I wonder if we kind of combine that with consumer as well, like from the bottom up. Can we make a little bit more impact on the cannabis side of things? Industry, I think, will continue to evolve, but I think it's still going to be a tough game. Until the US is fully legalized, the challenges will still remain, and even then it will just get more complicated. I'm an optimist, so I try to be positive about cannabis, and we are seeing that stigmas are kind of changing. This morning I was reading an article about seniors in Canada, and they said that, I forget what the data exact points is, so don't quote me on this, but they were basically saying how the more seniors or more older adults in Canada are now consuming cannabis, which is interesting. So it's kind of showing that, some trends are changing and things like that. So more education, more debunking of myths and demystifying the stereotypes. At least that's what I'm going to be working on. But it's a collective effort. We got to do it from all angles. So hopefully things will get a little bit easier, but it's still going to be a tough game. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's an interesting stat. Definitely believe it, because I know some people who are in their older years and who definitely enjoy cannabis. And I think that people are also more forthcoming with it now and a little bit more open with it as well. So hopefully these types of statistics get the reach into the audience that needs to really see it. So hopefully that's the case. Yeah, love what you're saying about predicting the industry and where it's going, and really gonna love seeing how you kind of play into that and how you evolve. And that's something that we're all doing, is evolving as businesses, as the industry is evolving and recreating ourselves. And that's one of the things of being an entrepreneur, is being open to recreating yourself and to pivoting. So I think that never really be so hard on yourself to say you're so rigid and this is like the only thing you're going to do. It's important to keep evolving as well. So you have some great initiatives coming up. Going to be really excited to see where you're going with the podcast and listening to that. So everyone that is listening today, make sure to follow Anna Cannabinista on Instagram. She's on all the platforms. Instagram, TikTok.
Just Google me.
I'll be there. She'll be there. She has a really great informative website, so make sure to go on her website. You'll get a lot of great tips and recipes, and she has some really great blogs. The dosage calculator is on there too, which is gonna be super helpful for a lot of people. So make sure to follow Anna. So I just want to say thank you very much for being on our podcast today. I learned a lot, so it was great having you here, and hopefully the audience here has learned a lot as well, and stay connected to Anna. So thank you very much for being here, and that's the wrap for today. Make sure to follow CannDelta as well on all of our social platforms, and check out our website as well. A lot of information there as well. So thank you everyone, and see you next time.